Hey, everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of Bridgerton Season 1 and 2, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Dearest viewer, 'tis the season, and you know what that means. Lady Whistledown is officially back. She has produced her latest newsletter. It's the first one of the season, and she introduces the new heavy hitters that are all trying to vie for that diamond status. There is the exquisite Miss Malhotra. There's Miss Stowell. She's supposed to be accomplished. Miss Hartigan is mild-mannered. Miss Kenworthy's got that confident swag. And then there's Miss Berrigan, who stands out in a crowd, and she's really excited to just have her name get dropped in the pamphlet. Of course, all of this is being written by Penelope Featherington, who is entering her third season. And the prospects are still looking pretty grim. Just looks like she's destined to be a spinster. But as for the other house, the Bridgertons, they once again have somebody that they're debuting for the season. It's Francesca. And she is about as interested in getting debuted to society as Eloise was. All right, she's a little more interested, but not much. She doesn't think this is a big deal at all. As everybody prepares for that day, because it's the day that everybody presents themselves in front of the Queen, there is a returning Bridgerton who comes back. It's Colin. Fresh off of his travels and adventures, he's got a credible haircut and that look that says, yeah, I was on a ship, but I want to dock it in your harbor, if you know what I'm saying. He meets up with his family, and he, along with the rest of the Bridgertons, head on over to the palace so that they can see Francesca debut herself for the Queen. When it comes time, though, for Francesca to go in front of the Queen is not impressed. I mean, it says it in her face. But then again, the Queen hasn't been impressed with anybody so far. She looks at this season as pretty dull for the rookies. Now, one family that noticeably isn't there is the Featheringtons, because the only girl that they have who is unmarried is Penelope. They're all sitting back, and Penelope's sisters are just excited about the fact that they found husbands, and Lady Featherington is excited because now they're finally back in good standing with society. They paid off all their debts. Now, the story that she's going with is that the girl's Aunt Petunia died and left them a bunch of money, but Aunt Petunia was a spinster, and she didn't own a lot. Varley brings this up to Lady Featherington and says, are people really going to believe that? But Lady Featherington isn't worried. She says, yeah, I mean, for all they know, she was just keeping all of her money in the floorboards. She kind of brushes off Varley's thoughts because everybody's getting ready for the first gathering after the new debutantes are shown to society, or at least shown to the Queen. The Queen, though, is noticeably missing from this gathering. It's got just about all of the mothers wondering what the hell's happening here. It does get a little awkward at this gathering, though, when Penelope runs into Eloise for the first time. First time since they had their blow-up. Penelope spent all summer away. So neither of them really know what to do, and Eloise just grabs Cressida and says, hey, do you want to go get some lemonade? Which comes as a huge shock to Penelope. She can't believe that Eloise has befriended Cressida. But Penelope is the only one who's surprised, so is Eloise's family. Violet Bridgerton certainly doesn't understand it, and Colin certainly doesn't understand it either. Either way, though, no one's really interfering in it. They're just kind of letting Eloise pick her own friends for the time being until it becomes a problem. As Violet is discussing this with Kate, up walks Lady Danbury, and they question Lady Danbury on where the Queen is. And Lady Danbury admits that the Queen might have skipped this one because she's still feeling a certain way about, well, kind of messing up the diamond of the season last year. A little bit awkward to say in front of Kate, but Kate understands. The diamond of the season, though, might not be a girl. It might be a boy. It might be Colin Bridgerton. I mean, he has every single group of girls swooning over him. And this dude knows how to spit game. It becomes painfully obvious that if Colin Bridgerton wanted a wife, he would easily have one. One of the girls he walks up to, of course, is his friend Penelope. But Penelope is very cold to him and very standoffish. She has not forgotten about what she overheard in the garden last year. Colin tries to get into a conversation with Penelope about the whole Cressida and Eloise situation, but Penelope just puts a stop to it real quickly and walks off. She goes to meet up with her mother and sisters, who are currently being approached by a woman who starts to ask the girls when they're going to have kids, because now there needs to be a Lord Featherington. And the woman gets pretty rude when she says, let's hope that whoever lays claim to be the next Lord Featherington has more scruples. Or does being a thief run in the family? And Lady Featherington tries to shut her up by saying, well, in fact, there shall be no more laying claim. The last Lord Featherington actually wrote a document bequeathing the estate to my girls. just as soon as one of them produces an heir. Now, this is news to both Prudence and Philippa, and that's because she just made it up. But what this is going to kick off is a major baby race between the two. At this point, the Featherington women are making their way out of the party, and Penelope tries to include herself in this conversation, but her sisters laugh it off. And it doesn't help when her mom, getting in the carriage, turns to Penelope and says, well, at least I know that you'll always be there to take care of me. That's the last thing Penelope actually wants. It's at that moment that she decides this season needs to be different than the previous season. She cannot end up a spinster. The next day, she's going to go to the modiste and try to start planning for dresses. But the relationship between Penelope and Eloise is something that Colin can't ignore. He knows these two are best friends, and it's just so weird that his sister is now hanging out with Cressida. So he asks her about it. Eloise doesn't reveal the big secret about why their friendship broke up. She just says that they grew apart. Eloise has no interest in going deeper into that conversation. She has to go to the modiste with her mother and sister. And that's where she actually does run into Penelope again. And this time, they actually have a chance to talk. It's something that Penelope wants, but Eloise had really no interest in. Penelope apologizes to Eloise and also thanks her for not revealing the secret of who Whistledown is. At one point, she says to Eloise, you may not understand what I did, but I was only trying to protect. And Eloise cuts her off and says, no, I do not need your explanations. I kept your secret because I don't want to revisit the past. You've got your life, now I've got my life. Penelope starts to question Eloise on whether or not she's actually friends with Cressida, but Eloise just walks off, not answering the question. And the answer is yeah, they actually seem to be friends. Now, while the women were at the modiste and the dress shops, the men had gone to Will Mondrich's club. Will gets great news that day. A guy named Walter Dundas, who works for the Crown, is basically responsible for ensuring the lines of succession run smoothly within great families. Well, he shows up, and he gives the Mondriches, or I should say his son Nicholas, shocking news. He informs Will that Nicholas is now the Baron of Kent. They're moving to a really, really, really nice house. The Mondriches head off, but everybody else is getting ready for the first ball of the season. This is going to be one that the Queen does attend. Everybody recognizes that the season is off to a pretty dull start, but then it gets shaken up when Penelope arrives, and she looks incredible. She's no longer sporting these pink lemonade colors. She's wearing this green dress. Her hair looks great. I'm telling you right now, I'd probably hit on her. I would. And guys start to do that, but the problem is Penelope is just so awkward that she doesn't know how to handle herself. It's actually painful for her old friend Eloise to watch her interact with these guys because she's just not used to it and she doesn't know what to say. She has, though, gotten the attention of the Queen, who's noticed her, as has Colin. In fact, everybody's noticed her. She's not the only one who's a little bit uncomfortable at this thing. So is Francesca. As people are dancing around them, Francesca reveals to Penelope that she doesn't really like this because she feels like she's being inspected by guys, like she's a racehorse or something. Even though Penelope isn't comfortable in this situation either, she does give Francesca a nice little pep talk. And when a dude walks over and asks Francesca to dance, she accepts. But later in the night, Penelope does get approached by a guy named Lord Debling. He's very complimentary. It takes Penelope way off guard, but their conversation is being overheard by Cressida, who decides to do something super mean. She intentionally steps on Penelope's dress so that when Penelope moves, the dress rips. Penelope is completely embarrassed by the moment. She runs out of that place. Before she does, though, she catches eyes with Eloise, who immediately starts to apologize, but Penelope doesn't want to hear it because she feels like this is who Eloise wants to hang out with. Well, birds of a feather flock together. Penelope running out of the ball does catch the notice of Colin, who goes to check on her, and he's really confused on why Penelope's being so cold to him, and finally she comes out with it and says, I overheard you last year in the garden. I know what you said. You said you'd never call on me. You know, I expected people to say mean things about me, but not you. Obviously, Colin had no idea she overheard this. He's completely embarrassed, and now he feels like he lost one of his best friends. But Penelope's so pissed off at how the night went that she goes home and she writes the next edition of Whistledown, and it is not flattering for Colin Bridgerton. After writing it, Penelope decides to go to bed, and the next morning, her mother actually gets a visitor, and it's from Walter Dundas. He's got some questions about this recent letter that's popped up, claiming that the estate would go to one of her daughters once she produced a male heir. He thinks it's fishy. Without saying it, he basically says that he doesn't believe it. And if he finds out that it's forged before one of the Featherington girls has an heir, it's not going to be pretty for the Featheringtons. They're going to lose all their titles, their houses, the standing in society, everything. It's going to be really embarrassing for Lady Featherington and the rest of the girls. Lady Featherington wasn't the only Featherington woman to get a guest that day. While out in the garden, Penelope gets a guest, and it's Colin. He's come to apologize. He feels horrible about the comments last year. And he admits that, yeah, he has changed. He's not the man that he was last season, but he's certainly not ashamed of Penelope. In fact, it's the opposite. He seeks her out because he knows that she's going to lift his spirits. He starts bestowing a bunch of compliments on her and then says, "I'm proud to call you my very good friend." He realizes, though, that what she's looking for is a husband, so he wants to help her out. He wants to be her guru of game. He's going to teach her how to talk in a public setting to guys so that she can get a husband. He knows that with his help, she's going to do just fine this season. And by the time he leaves, Penelope's feeling way better about their relationship, but then she remembers what she wrote and she feels horrible about it. And when Colin gets back, it's Eloise who's already read the latest edition of Whistledown, and she shows him what Whistledown was writing about him. Now, Eloise never tells Colin who Whistledown really is, but Colin's pissed. And after what Whistledown did to Eloise the previous year, Colin vows that if he ever finds out who Whistledown is, he will ruin their life. Now, while Colin was making this bold proclamation, down the hall, Violet was discussing the upcoming season with Francesca and just making sure that she's going to be open to a relationship. And like anyone, Francesca wants what Anthony and Kate have. True love. But what they have is something else. I mean, they're banging each other's brains out, their love and life. And because Kate married Anthony, she's technically supposed to now be the Viscountess. But Violet has yet to move out, and she's dragging her feet, and Anthony's noticed this. So he tells Kate, "Look, I'm going to talk to my mom. I'm going to get her out of this house." But Kate stops him and says, "No, why would you? Look, we have our whole lives to be this Count, Viscountess, all that crap. Why don't we just extend the honeymoon? Let her stay. Let her do what she enjoys doing. And, we'll continue to do stuff to each other. Adult stuff, fun stuff, with our mouths." In episode 2, Eloise, Benedict, and Colin all head to the park. And they're all discussing the season. Eloise not really wanting to get back into it, but she did promise Anthony that she would at least try. Colin, meanwhile, agreed to meet up with Penelope. This is going to be their first lesson. He is a little surprised that she still wants his advice, especially after what Whistledown wrote about him, but Penelope just brushes that aside and says she's an idiot. She doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Now that she's agreed, he wants to see her skills in action because, as he puts it, men are pretty simple creatures. He feels like this should be pretty quick. The problem is when Penelope walks up to a group of guys, she just looks flustered. She's uncomfortable. Yeah, the first lesson doesn't go great. When she gets home, she heads right up to bed, and her mother doesn't even notice because what her mother's concerned with is what Mr. Dundas talked about. She's concerned that her 2 daughters who are married off are just dragging their feet. And she's trying to prompt both of them to, get on with it, make a baby. So all of this gets swept under the rug, the fact that she forged this letter. But it just doesn't seem like either Philippa or Prudence are really picking up on what she's talking about. Penelope has no idea about any of this, and the next day when she wakes up, she heads to her second lesson with Colin, although she does tell Colin, "Look, if I'm a lost cause, I won't take offense to it. We can just stop all this." But Colin doesn't think she's a lost cause. He thinks that not only is she teachable, she will figure out how to spit game. He knows that deep down, she's a very interesting person who has a lot to offer. She's just too self-conscious. He knows that in order to get the best out of her, she needs to be comfortable. So he says, "Well, what's the one thing in the world that makes you the most comfortable?" And she tells him, "It used to be Sunday teas at Bridgerton House, but that's not really an option anymore because of the relationship with Eloise." She always felt like that was the one place she could go and be herself without any repercussions, but unfortunately, it's not really a possibility. Colin does ask her what happened between you and my sister, but Penelope decides to not answer the question and just tells him that she has to get back before the two are, quote, noticed together. And as for Eloise, well, she's busy the next day heading to the Modiste with her mother and Francesca because they got great news from Lady Danbury. Lady Danbury convinced the Queen that because this season has been off to a very dull start and it's been noticed by Lady Whistledown, what the Queen should do is open up this, quote, Diamond of the Season award that really is all but made up. Well, she should open it up to everybody that's available, not just newcomers. And that's going to cause a mad dash with all the girls to catch the queen's notice. Those that have been brought into society already and those that are just being brought in. For Eloise, she wants no parts of this at all. She debuted in the season last year. She didn't find a match, and she's comfortable with that, no matter what she told Anthony. And she feels like Francesca probably feels the same way, but Francesca corrects her and says, despite what you think, I actually do want to find a husband. That's the one thing about this whole season that is actually appealing to me. I just want to do it before the queen is interested in me. That's when Eloise comes up with a great idea. Spread word around town that the queen has opened this thing up so that all the other girls will be interested. They'll eventually catch the queen's eye before the queen can even look at Francesca or Eloise, and they don't have to worry about it. But while they were gone at the Modiste, back at Bridgerton House, Penelope showed up. She was called upon by Colin, and she thought that Colin merely wanted a ride. They would go somewhere else for the next lesson, but Colin says, no, we're doing it here, which does make Penelope very uncomfortable. But Colin reassures her, my sister's not here. Don't worry. No one's going to see you. It's just me and you. We need to do the lesson here. He goes to the drawing room of the Bridgerton house, and the lesson's going to be pretending like they're at a ball. He brought her there because she did say she was comfortable, but in this scenario he's laid out, she's anything but. Especially when he wants to pretend to be one of her suitors. He wants her to approach him and basically hit on him, which she does a really good job at because everything she says she actually believes. It's a tad bit awkward. She brushes it off like she didn't actually mean it directed towards him, but we all know it was. And that's when they hear some commotion from the outside, and it's Eloise, Francesca, their mother. They've all returned, which means that Penelope needs to go hide in another room so that she's not seen. As she's hiding in the room that Colin put her in, she notices that Colin's journal is open, and curiosity gets the best of her. She starts reading it. It's from his travels abroad to Paris, and, well, it's a little spicy. And as she's getting into the really good stuff, Colin walks in and catches her, and he's pissed. He doesn't want her reading it. He doesn't want anyone reading it. It's not for anyone's eyes but his own. And even though she apologizes, he's still pissed off about it. When he goes to grab it, he knocks over a light that breaks, glass is everywhere, and when he goes to pick up the glass, he cuts his hand pretty good. And I'm just going to say it. He cuts his hand on the palm of it. I don't know who taught this guy how to pick up glass, but it's a very weird cut. Anyway, it's bleeding profusely. Penelope, though, does feel really bad about it, and he does accept her help to bandage it up. With Colin's hand bandaged up, she knows she has to get out of there, so she starts to make a mad dash to the exit. But right before she does leave, she ends up getting caught by Eloise. It's right down the hall. They make eye contact, and it is awkward, but Penelope gets out of there. It's something that Eloise does bring up to Colin as the two head to the ball that night. And Colin does apologize for it, but he says to her, I just don't know how to act because I don't know what happened between you two. Eloise sticks with her original story, that they just grew apart. She doesn't wish for Penelope to be friendless. She realizes that Colin might be her only friend at this point. She just doesn't want to see her at her house. Eloise, though, does ask Colin how she's doing. And Colin says she's doing great. She's actually looking to seek a husband, which comes as a surprise to Eloise because they always talked about growing old together and being spinsters. But Colin tells his sister that Penelope's enlisted him to teach her the ropes on how to get a husband. So that's one of the main reasons he's going to this ball today, to help her out. A short time later, they arrive at the ball, and word has certainly gotten around that the queen has opened this competition up. She is being flooded with girls just trying to get her attention. Violet Bridgerton would love for one of her daughters to be that, but neither of them are interested. When Violet brings it up to Francesca especially, Francesca says, yeah, I think it can wait. I remember Lady Danbury saying that there was a suitor who was really interested in music. Can I meet him? Because music is one of Francesca's passions. While the Bridgerton women, though, mingle through the crowd and try to find husbands, the Bridgerton guys, i.e. Colin and Benedict, they're still catching a lot of flies because they are as sweet as honey. Women continue to come up to them trying to get their attention. Colin, however, turns all these girls down because the only reason he's shown up is to help out Penelope. The first thing Penelope does, though, when she sees Colin is apologize once again for reading his stuff, but she does compliment him and say that it's really good writing and she'd love to read more of it because He's just amazing at it. And Colin thinks and says, okay, I'll tell you what. I will consider that if you speak to one lord tonight. Penelope looks around the room. She picks one guy. She walks up to him. And it just so happens that she says the wrong thing to this guy. He ends up running away crying. But it's a moment that both her and Colin can just laugh about. Penelope actually comes up in conversation, though, with Cressida and Eloise. With Cressida becoming Eloise's new best friend, she feels like she can confide in her about the struggles that are going on with her and Penelope. She tells Cressida how Penelope was at her house that day. It was awkward. And when Cressida points out that Penelope is chatting a lot with her brother, Eloise corrects her and says, actually, my brother's helping her try to find a husband this season. Now, 2 new guests to this ball are the Mondriches. With Alice and Will's child now having that new status in that new sweet house, they get invited to these sort of things. But for Will, he still feels a little bit out of place. And for Alice, she's growing accustomed to this new lifestyle that is just different from their old one. For example, they're not supposed to sleep in the same bedroom. It's weird. But Benedict Bridgerton is more than happy to show Will and Alice around and show them kind of the lay of the land. And the one lesson he teaches them is, you guys are already married, so a lot of these rules don't apply. Do whatever you want. Drink as much as you want. Dance as much as you want. Doesn't matter. Have fun. Enjoy it. The big commotion, though, at this ball is the fact that the Queen has seen enough. She turns to Lady Danbury. She says, yeah, I'm about to head out. And Lady Danbury wants what's best for the Bridgertons. She's really good friends with Violet. She knows how beautiful and how much Francesca has to offer. She knows that Francesca could be the diamond of the season. It's just Francesca isn't interested in it. So it's basically up to Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury to kind of push the Queen to notice her. And right before the Queen does take off, Lady Danbury takes the Queen down the hall where she overhears a piano player. And the piano player is Francesca, crushing it. It has the Queen seeing Francesca in a completely new light. And it seems like when the Queen does head out, that Francesca is currently the lead to be the diamond of the season. One girl, though, that didn't get the Queen's attention this time around was Penelope. She does, however, catch the eye of a guy named Lord Remington, and the two start chatting it up, and turns out they have a ton in common. They're both readers. So after the conversation, Penelope excitedly goes over to Colin and says, he's going to call on me tomorrow. Colin's excited for her, and after this 4-minute-long conversation with Lord Remington, Penelope is smitten hard. But that is when disaster strikes. Because word has gotten around to the partygoers that Colin Bridgerton is helping Penelope find a husband. And even though this shouldn't be that big of a deal, it is. It's extremely embarrassing for Penelope. It's also embarrassing for Colin. Suddenly, everybody's looking at Penelope, and they're just mocking her. And it forces Penelope to flee the ball again. 2 Bridgertons chase after Penelope to make sure she's okay, Colin being the one and Eloise being the other. But the 2 end up meeting up on the steps, and Colin asks Eloise, did you tell anybody that I was helping her? And she starts kind of beating around the bush a little bit, but later admits, well, I told Cressida in confidence. And Colin loses it on her. He doesn't understand why Eloise is friends with Cressida instead of Penelope. And Eloise continues to keep her mouth shut on what happened between her and Penelope. That night when Penelope gets home, she writes the next edition of Whistledown, and she has to unfortunately put herself in it. As for her sisters, they get to work trying to have a baby. And as for the Mondriches, they also decide that, you know what, we're not going to follow by these rules. We're not sleeping in separate beds. That's dumb. We're going to sleep with each other because we're adults. The next day, the edition of Whistledown comes out, and everybody's reading it. And for Eloise, she is a little surprised that Penelope put herself in it, but she's more upset with Cressida. And she confronts Cressida about what she said to her, because she told her in confidence. And Cressida blabbed her big mouth again, resulting in embarrassment for her old friend. But it turns out that Eloise was actually the idiot in the situation, because Cressida didn't tell anybody. No, in fact, it was Eloise and her big mouth. She was saying it so loud that other women heard it. Cressida, when asked if she had any gossip, actually kept her mouth shut for once. So Eloise is left there with stones and a broken glass house. As for Penelope, well, she's dealing with the embarrassment of Whistledown coming out, especially when her mom comes up to her and says how embarrassing the moment is. Her mom still has no idea that she is Whistledown. Lady Featherington starts to tell Penelope that she needs to accept the fact she's not going to marry. And then she realizes what a mean thing that is to say, so she starts to walk it back, but the damage is done. Now, for Penelope, all she wants to do is sit in the house all day and kind of wallow. And you can't even blame her. Late at night, though, she does get a visitor, and it's Colin. Colin wants to check in on her, and she's just embarrassed. She starts beating herself up, calling her sad and stupid, thinking that she had a chance at love, and Colin does his best to talk her out of that line of thinking, but Penelope doesn't really want to hear it at the moment. She does, however, ask something of Colin. She wants a kiss. And Colin doesn't really want to, but she starts to explain to him that she could die tomorrow. And she's never kissed anybody, and she doesn't want to die never having kissed anybody. And it looks more and more likely that she's going to end up alone for the rest of her life. So she just wants to know what it feels like. Colin reluctantly agrees to this. He goes in and he kisses her. And afterwards, she runs back in the house. But Colin, it seems like he's felt something with that kiss. In episode 3, when Colin wakes up the next morning, he's a little frazzled because he had a dream about kissing Penelope. It's gotten that deep. It gets even more awkward when he goes to meet his family in the family room, and Hyacinth tells him that what he did for Penelope was really noble, and she's really lucky to have a friend like him. And he starts blurting out, yes, that's right, we are friends. We are only friends. It's just awkward. But for Violet, she's not even paying it any attention because what she's focused on is the fact that the Queen has seemingly granted her approval upon Francesca, which means that Francesca's going to have her pick of the litter when it comes to suitors. She's going to be able to choose the best guy. And even though Francesca has really no interest in being the diamond of the season, it seems like she's going to be. And in fact, over at the castle, the Queen and Lady Danbury are already planning on who they'll match up Francesca with. It can't just be any schlub. It's got to be a noble person. Now, over at the Featherington household, the big topic of conversation continues to be both daughters getting pregnant. But one of the girls gets a visitor, and it's Penelope. And when she goes downstairs, she's pretty surprised because it's Eloise. The first thing Eloise does is address what Whistledown wrote about Penelope. She thought it was pretty harsh. And Penelope tells Eloise it would be fishy if she didn't write about it. But what Eloise really came to do was apologize and own up to the fact that the word getting out about her and Colin was because she blabbed about it. It wasn't intentional, but it happened. Penelope accepts the apology and invites her friend inside. She's just happy that maybe they can rekindle this thing, but Eloise says, no, I have to go meet a friend, but I do hope you find what you're looking for this season. And then she takes off. At this stage, Penelope is finally ready to head out to society. It's been a couple days. She's ready to finally be seen, even though she's still getting a lot of stares. While out walking in the park, she ends up running into Colin, and they have a secret conversation thanks to a weeping willow. But the entire conversation is really, really awkward. Penelope saying we can't continue the lessons, Colin saying he agrees, but asking Penelope why. She tries to explain that she already embarrassed herself, and if it continues, she'll embarrass his family as well. And he says he understands, but it's pretty clear he wants the lessons to continue. All of it is just really awkward. Eventually, this awkward conversation does end because they do realize that if they are seen together, it's probably going to be the talk of the next edition of Whistledown. Penelope decides to attend the ball that night, which is a big deal. This is the first ball she's attending since, well, everybody found out about her and Colin. And though a few eyes will be on her, most of the women's eyes are on Lord Debling. He's the most eligible bachelor. He's finally looking for a wife, but he's a bit bizarre. He's a vegetarian. He likes to travel. He's big into nature and hunting and all of that. And one girl who has Debling in her sights is Cressida. And it's not even like Cressida really wants the guy. It's more her mother pushing her. Her mother tries to explain that if she doesn't marry this season, well, Daddy's going to probably pull all funding. He's already pretty pissed off, and eventually Daddy and Mommy are going to have to find Cressida a husband, and they don't want to do that. So go, woo this Debling guy. And Cressida does try, but initially she fails because she's not anything like Debling. One of the problems is she's just trying too hard. Cressida, however, is going to have some competition, and it's surprising competition. It is Penelope. Because Lord Debling walks up to her, and she's very surprised at this, and finds out that Lord Debling does not read Lady Whistledown. He doesn't really care for it. When Penelope tells Lord Debling what she did, he's actually impressed, because she did something different. He likes that. She didn't conform to society, because he feels like he doesn't conform to society. The more they chat, the more Lord Debling likes her, because she is a free thinker. And even though he's not supposed to really be helping out, the whole time, Colin has his eyes on Penelope. The day after the ball, Cressida and Eloise get together, and Cressida informs Eloise that she's planning on marrying Lord Debling, even though Debling doesn't know that yet. And Eloise is a little surprised because Lord Debling is so different than Cressida. The things he likes, she hates. But also with the fact that Lord Debling was spending a lot of time talking to Penelope. And Cressida laughs at that. She doesn't look at Penelope as a threat at all. But she does know that because of the differences of her and Lord Debling, she's going to need Eloise's help. And Eloise says, all right, I'll help you out. I'll inform you on some nature stuff so you don't sound like an idiot. Most of the town, though, is getting really excited for a balloon. Folks, this is one of those episodes that makes you appreciate the era that we live in. Like when you can't find anything to watch on Netflix or Hulu or Apple or HBO. These people, they literally came from all over to look at a hot air balloon and watch it go into the sky. That's their entertainment. But all the bigwigs show up for this event. And by the way, that includes the Queen. And this will be the event where the Queen introduces Francesca to her hand-picked suitor. It's a guy named Lord Semidani from Vienna. He seems perfect, but when he and Francesca actually talk about what they both want for their lives, it's completely different. As for another Bridgerton who's single, and this time I'm talking about Benedict, he's been trying to avoid this girl that he danced with since he danced with her because she became a little clingy. When he sees her at the event, he ducks into one of the tents and he starts overhearing this lecture on hot air balloons. While in the tent, he makes a really stupid comment thinking that he's only being in earshot of men, and he realizes, oh crap, I'm not in earshot of men. No, in fact, he's within earshot of a woman, an attractive woman at that. Her name is Lady Tilly Arnold, and she is a bad bitch because women don't really go to these things, but not only does she go to attend it, she basically yells at all the guys for being judgmental towards the speaker. The fact that she has this air of confidence has Benedict a little intimidated. Now outside this tent, the battle for Lord Debling rages on. He was talking to Cressida, but Lord Debling then called over Penelope. And both Penelope and Cressida start going back and forth trying to convince Lord Debling that they're better suited for him by just bringing up stuff like, I like grass, and I like this bird. And just like the previous night, Colin Bridgerton has his eyes on the conversation. But then disaster kind of strikes because the hot air balloon starts taking off a little bit. It gets really windy and blustery, and Colin Bridgerton, along with Benedict and a few others, have to wrangle this thing back in. But the hot air balloon, when it was taking off, was headed right for Penelope, and Lord Debling dove to save her, or at least shield her from a blow. It was very noble and chivalrous, but it's something that Cressida couldn't let go. So when Lord Debling started walking back, Cressida acted like she hurt her ankle so that Lord Debling would pay her more attention. The heroics of Lord Debling, though, are completely overshadowed by what Colin, Benedict, and the rest of the guys did by reeling in this balloon in enough time for the guy who actually owns the balloon to take off in it. I mean, you would think that Colin saved a bunch of puppies from a burning building the way people are acting towards him now. Even at that night's ball, a lot of people are still focused on what the guys did. But for Violet, she's just focused on one thing. The fact that once again, it looks like she has a daughter who's a diamond of the season. And that's when Violet drops a glove. And you know what happens when a girl drops a glove? A guy picks it up. And the guy who picks up her glove, she's never seen before, but he's got this great bald head and this facial hair and eyes, and he's even got a nose. I mean, Violet's smitten a little bit, but she's got to get back on track because, her daughter and marriage and stuff. So she thanks this mystery man for picking up her glove, and then she heads into the ball. Turns out, though, they wouldn't be strangers for long because later in the night, as Violet is looking for Francesca, who went out to the garden and just get some fresh air, that mystery man returns. He shows up and they start talking about how nerve-wracking it is to marry off daughters because he has daughters of his own, but they've all married off, flown the nest, yada, yada, yada. But they start bonding over this. That's when Lady Danbury interrupts this conversation because it turns out this mystery man is named Marcus, and he's Lady Danbury's brother. And Lady Danbury is not all that thrilled that he's come into town. And yet, even though it's her friend's brother, I mean, her friend did sleep with her dad, so maybe even up the score a little bit. Violet, though, isn't the only one to have an interesting interaction. Benedict once again runs into Lady Tilly Arnold. But this time, Lady Tilly Arnold is not really combative. In fact, she tells Benedict that she was impressed with what he did, the heroics with the hot air balloon. And then she informs him that she's a widower. The two end up going to the dance floor and dancing, but this is the first girl that might have met Benedict's match. But the battle for Lord Debling continues to rage on at this ball, and Cressida strikes the first blow. She starts talking to Lord Debling, trying to schmooze him a little bit, and finally Penelope is able to get him alone, and she admits, look, earlier today I wasn't myself. I mean, I was saying things like, I love grass, and I don't mind grass, but in all honesty, I'm a homebody. I like to stay indoors, I like to read books, that's who I am. And to her surprise, Lord Debling laughs and says, good. I mean, I'm not looking for someone just like me. What he wants is to be with somebody who knows exactly who they are and embraces their uniqueness. And while Lord Debling was planning on getting lemonade for Cressida, he hands that lemonade over to Penelope and the two continue to talk. And this isn't lost on Cressida, who is waiting for that lemonade along with Eloise. Eloise tries to console her friend on the fact that she might be losing this battle to Penelope, but it doesn't help any. But little does Cressida know that there might be a battle going on for Penelope, and it's between Lord Debling and Colin. Colin's been watching Penelope all night. At one point, he finds his mother and he asks, hey, when you and Dad got together, you said the most important thing was friendship. How did you go from the friend stage to becoming lovers? And she tells him, your dad finally got the courage to tell me how he felt. Colin tries to play this off like he was just curious, but Violet can tell exactly who Colin's talking about. And Colin decides, you know what? All right, it's time. It's time I go over to Penelope and tell her maybe we should be more than friends. Unfortunately, what Colin wasn't banking on was that Lord Debling already signed her dance card. Colin can't get the words out in enough time, and Debling comes over and grabs Penelope and escorts her on the dance floor. In episode 4, about a week later, Lord Debling ends up calling on Penelope, which is a huge deal. It's even shocking to her family. They can't believe that somehow she has snagged the #1 bachelor on the market, but she seemingly has. During calling hour, there's another surprising person that shows up at a woman's door. It's Benedict. He shows up at Lady Arnold's house looking to call upon her, but she tells him, I don't want to be called upon. No, she just wants to have sex with him, I assume, because they go up to her bedroom and they start hooking up. It's cool. And then finally over at the Bridgerton household, the morning starts out with a conversation between Colin and his mother. She knows that when Colin asked about friends becoming lovers of the day, there was a reason for it. She figures that it probably had to do with Penelope. So she just asks him, was there a reason behind that? Trying to pry that story out of him. But he says, no, I was just being speculative, that's all. Violet's not really going to press the issue, so she just moves on. She moves on to Francesca's calling hour. Violet is preparing for Lord Samadani to call upon Francesca, but Francesca does warn her mother, hey, it's not a given. They then hear, though, that there is somebody to call upon Francesca, and it's a guy named John Sterling, who's the Earl of Kilmartin. It's not Lord Samadani, but John Sterling had a really nice conversation with Francesca the other night when she stepped out to get some fresh air. Well, I mean, conversation, it really wasn't a conversation. They literally didn't say many words to each other, but Francesca definitely gets a smile on her face when he shows up. And just like the other night, they just sit there and they don't say a word. It's pretty weird. Even her family is kind of looking from a distance going, what the hell is going on here? But then that all gets broken up when Lord Samadani does show up. And it's a little awkward for Lord Kilmartin, but he understands and he steps out to let Lord Samadani have his moment with Francesca. Once calling hour is over, all of the families are going to gather to go to this art gallery exhibit during the day. It's really another chance for women and men of society to mingle about each other and hopefully find a match. One of those women is Penelope, but when she dare grab a book and start looking at it, because this art exhibit is seemingly at someone's house, her mother comes over and yells at her. Her mother, seeing the opportunity that Penelope has to marry Lord Debling and have a good life for herself, doesn't want Penelope squandering it. Her advice to Penelope is to play dumb and have the men mansplain everything to her. And when Lord Debling does interrupt this conversation, it gets weird because Lord Debling asks her, hey, are you reading the fabled Northwest Passage? Penelope starts to answer, yeah, I actually was. I find it But Lady Featherington cuts her off and just says she finds it terribly confusing. We can't understand it. Could you explain it to us? And obviously that's embarrassing for Penelope, who can read and does understand all of it. Lady Featherington does end up moving aside to let Penelope actually have a conversation with Lord Debling, but as the two are talking, that's when the Bridgertons show up, and Colin right away notices that his friend Penelope is chatting it up with Lord Debling, and she's smiling a lot. But Colin isn't the only one who's a little perturbed by this potential relationship. Another eagle-eyed partygoer is Cressida. She really thought she had a chance with Lord Debling, and now she's worried that she's going to be married off to one of her father's friends who's old and decrepit. What both Cressida and Colin aren't aware of is just how good the conversation between Penelope and Lord Debling is going. It's going so well that Lord Debling hints at proposing to Penelope, and if she would accept or not. And she doesn't really give an answer. But she is very excited over the prospect of becoming Lady Debling. It looks like Penelope has won the battle for Lord Debling, and Cressida is going to have to wait for somebody else. But the next day, the calling hour does not go as expected. She does have somebody call upon her, but it's Eloise. And that really pisses off Cressida's parents. So much so that as Eloise is leaving, she overhears her dad say, "You got to stop hanging out with that Bridgerton girl." Because they desperately want their daughter to marry off. It's not like Cressida doesn't want that too, but she also doesn't want to lose her only friend. As for Eloise's mother and sister, Francesca, they're walking the streets and discussing the next night's ball and Lord Semidani and whether there's real interest there when Francesca notices that Lord Kilmartin is a few feet away, so she stops him. She questions him about why he left so abruptly the other morning, but he says, "You had another caller?" At one point in this awkward interaction, they overhear somebody playing a fiddle, and when Lord Kilmartin says, "Man, it's really enjoyable music, don't you think?" Francesca says, "Actually, no. The pace is too fickle. When you think you're starting to comprehend the melody, the song is over. A song like this would be far better if it were played in 3/4, so one could, in fact, feel the music." And then, just like the other day, Lord Kilmartin excuses himself and walks away, leaving both Bridgerton women kind of confused at his behavior. The big moment of that day, though, comes at the Featherington household, when Lord Debling shows up, but he doesn't really meet with Penelope. He meets with Lady Featherington to ask for Penelope's hand in marriage. And Lady Featherington is thrilled with Penelope. She can't believe that she accomplished this feat. But just as Lady Featherington is getting really excited about the prospects of her daughter marrying Debling, Penelope says, "I haven't said yes yet." And Lady Featherington kind of laughs at her and says, What? This guy's perfect. Like, what do you want?" But Penelope doesn't know how to answer that question. And that's when her mother looks at her and says, "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're holding out for love. Penelope, love is make-believe. It's only in storybooks. This is why I didn't want you reading. You know what's romantic? Security. Stability. That's Lord Debling. Be smart, and if you're not going to be, then I'll be it for you." Penelope is planning on seeing Lord Debling later that night at that night's ball. Well, one person who might not be there is Colin. He comes downstairs and tells his mother, "Yeah, I'm not feeling that great." And that's because Colin's hungover. He spent most of the previous day at a brothel. In a last-ditch effort to get him to show up, because, after all, a mother knows what's going on, Violet says to him, "You know, it'd be a shame if you missed the fruits of your labor. I hear Penelope may be getting proposed to tonight." Lady Featherington can't stop telling anyone who will listen. And Colin can't believe that Penelope's getting proposed to that quickly, but it does give him food for thought. Violet, Francesca, and Eloise then head to that night's ball, where Violet is just laser focused on everything Francesca is doing. So much so that when Marcus, or I should say Lord Anderson, comes over to give her some cake, she says, "I have no appetite." But Lord Anderson has some appetite for that ass. The two start chatting it up, and at one point Violet mentions how shaping society is one of Lady Danbury's pastimes, and that's surprising to Marcus, because Marcus and Lady Danbury don't have a great relationship. They're not very close. Marcus showing up at all has really annoyed Lady Danbury. He asks Violet who's the target this time, and Violet says, "It's my daughter, Francesca." But I just don't know that she's found that spark yet. He then brings up his relationship with his wife, how it was arranged, but he ended up finding that spark, and Violet brings up that her marriage was a love marriage. And Marcus comments that he was always jealous of that. He always wanted a love marriage. But those two aren't the only ones that are watching Francesca and Lord Semidani dance. The Queen, along with Lady Danbury, and Alice Mondrich are also watching from the balcony. The Queen is so invested in this marriage because if the, quote, diamond of the season marries who she handpicked for the diamond of the season, it'll look favorably in the next edition of Whistledown. When the conversation dies down a little bit, Alice turns to Lady Danbury and says, "Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me up here. I didn't want to miss another ball, especially showing up solo." And the reason why Alice has shown up by herself is because Will is busy tending to his club, which is really looked at as a no-no. Now that he's a member of society, he's not supposed to be working. He's supposed to hire people to do that. But Will literally enjoys working at the club. That's the problem. And Lady Danbury has to tell Alice, you got to convince him to do something else because the Queen is not going to look favorably on Will working at a club now that he has this title. So Alice is going to have to figure out something. After this conversation with Alice, though, Lady Danbury looks down and she sees that her brother is talking to Violet, so she decides to head for the door. As she's trying to leave, though, Marcus ends up flagging her down and says, "Where are you going?" Lady Danbury explains that everything's going well. The Queen is satisfied. She's going to head home for the night. And Marcus asks her, "If you're done meddling, then can I be your next target? I do hear you're something of a molder of society." And Marcus has shown back up in town because he is looking for a new wife. But Lady Danbury shuts down that idea real quick and in rude fashion. She's not trying to help out her brother, especially hook up with Violet Bridgerton. She then heads home. Now, the Queen's diamond of the season has been spending most of the night with Lord Semidani, but that doesn't stop Francesca from talking to Lord Kilmartin at the ball. Francesca, though, is kind of annoyed with Kilmartin. She can't quite figure him out. He shows up, he doesn't talk, he leaves. And she doesn't mind the not talking part, but the leaving abruptly part, she's annoyed with. And Lord Kilmartin can figure that out, so he says, "You got to forgive me for rushing off, but I wanted to get you this." And he hands her a music scroll. And what the music is from is the fiddler from the other day that was playing. He had the music changed exactly how she thought it should be. Kilmartin goes on to tell her that he's not a man of many words, but what he does believe in is the power of a gesture. And that gesture seems to work because Francesca is beaming. She's so excited to get this gesture that she wants to leave early to go play it at home, which takes Violet completely off guard, and it also takes Lord Semidani off guard. But the person that pisses off the most is the Queen. The Queen can't figure out what the hell's going on. Now, not too far away from the Queen, in another booth, is Eloise, trying to avoid everybody. And Cressida shows up, trying to chat with her friend, but Eloise says, "Well, are you sure that you should be here? I mean, I am that Bridgerton girl." And Cressida apologizes for what her father said. Cressida has no plans on not hanging out with Eloise. A late arrival to this party is going to be Eloise's brother, Colin, who on second thought decided to show up at the party because he couldn't live with himself knowing that Penelope has gotten engaged and he didn't get a chance to tell Penelope how he felt. Colin shows up and completely interrupts a dance with Debling and Penelope, which leaves Debling a little surprised, and that's when Cressida swoops in to steal that dance, seeing her opportunity. And at first, Colin is just trying to talk Penelope out of marrying Lord Debling because she barely knows him. And Penelope kind of gives Colin the same spiel that her mother gave her earlier in the day. The conversation is very contentious, and when the dance ends, Lord Debling starts heading for the exit, ignoring Penelope altogether, and Penelope kind of yells at Colin while chasing after Lord Debling. When she finally catches up to him, Lord Debling is not planning on proposing. Because after having a quick conversation with Cressida, he's finally figured it out. All week, he's noticed that Penelope is searching for somebody, and now he realizes that somebody is Colin Bridgerton. He was told that Penelope reads from this window. Well, he found out that across the street is the Bridgerton household. It's pretty clear that Penelope has feelings for Colin Bridgerton. Debling tells her that he's going to be gone for 3 years, so it's important that he make a match with somebody whose affections are not already engaged elsewhere. He ends the conversation by telling her that whatever she's searching for, he hopes she finds it, and he leaves. And he's replaced by Lady Featherington, who right away says, "What have you done?" And Penelope is so turned off by that question, because it's clear to her that the only value she has to her mother is an engagement ring on her finger. For the third time this season, Penelope runs out of a ball and finds a carriage to get into. Only this time, she's joined by Colin Bridgerton. At first, the conversation's contentious, but when he finds out that Lord Debling didn't propose, it opens the door for Colin to tell Penelope how he feels. The two hook up, they kiss. A hand goes under her dress. She makes this face that I make when a place has s'mores ice cream. It's rare, but it's delicious. The two finally have told each other how they feel, and when they arrive at the Bridgerton house, Colin gets out and he turns to